Good afternoon, class. Peace and understanding. Well, overstanding, rather, because we don't want to be under anything. We always want to be above. So I wanted to tap in and give you some information about some questions that I have posted for an assignment. It's only 5 questions, and it's just kind of piggybacking off the lecture and what we've been discussing as it relates to the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, and the Renaissance / Protestant Reformation. We've been talking at length about that. I feel we had an excellent class today as I explained Martin Luther, the selling of indulgences, and some of the hypocrisy that was going on in the Catholic Church and what finally became of Martin Luther. I talked about Pope Leo X, who orchestrated and ordained the papal bull, which basically gave a free hand to Portugal to go out and enslave anyone that they deemed an infidel. So we had some excellent information that we shared today. Also, how the Catholic Church, for all intents and purposes, were planning on burning Martin Luther at the stake after he was called by the Emperor Charles V to a diet of worms. And a diet of worms was a convention or a meeting, if you will, of religious figures that were charged with going through a religious legal process of finding Martin Luther guilty of heresy. And we said that in class that heresy speaks to one leaving a particular religious theology, and the aforementioned theology would now say that you were a non-believer or that you were a heretic. So we talked about that, but I wanted to share some other information. First, I want to point out that the term Dark Ages, and this is one of your questions, that's why I said you had to watch the video. The term Dark Ages, Saeculum Obscurum, which is a Latin word that means obscure, Saeculum Obscurum. And this term was first coined in 1330 by Petrarch. Petrarch was a philosopher that introduced this time period as we know in Europe, which is a period at the fall of the Roman Empire, the Western Roman Empire, the Byzantine Empire. And once the empire fell, Europe spiraled into a time frame of superstition, stagnation, backwardness, illiteracy, and warfare. But in the year 1602, Caesar Baronius re-emerged and introduced that term again. So both of those are the correct answer for the questions that you have to do for your class. But as we're talking about that, I wanted to point something else out too as it relates to the Dark Ages and that time period. In Europe, especially in England, you had a period known as the Black Death and the Plague of 1665. So what does this entail? This entailed basically that over 50% of Europe met their demise. 50% of the population of Europe died for various reasons. So looking at that, that's almost an insurmountable amount of people. And if you can imagine what that would look like if 50% of the population of the United States of America had either, met their demise. They died due to disease. And the plague of 1665, or the Black Death, was a monumental disease, a monumental outbreak of disease. But here's the thing. You have, after them investigating and trying to kind of find out what are the causes of this, they were ill-equipped to determine what this was, because the Europeans were accustomed to certain living styles, as we talked about. So they issued a document called the Bill of Mortality. And what did the Bill of Mortality do? It went out and attempted to list the causes of deaths from their citizenry, the causes of death that was brought about. And so they came up with some conclusions, which today would be unthinkable. But there were a list of do's and don'ts that should have been observed by the people. But number one is that Europe, the Europeans, especially in England, in Ireland, and all in the surrounding areas, had the tendency of living in close proximity with animals. The Bill of Mortality forbade that the letting of swine running around freely, rodents, dogs, goats, and other animals would live in close proximity. And if you have that measure in place and then you chime in and have also poor hygiene and consuming and bathing in unclean water. Unclean water can bring about dysentery. That's a disease that could rapidly end your life as well. But the first and foremost was these animals. These are rodents and stuff that ran rampant due to the poor hygiene, due to the uncleanliness of these people. Disease was always given a breeding ground. So the Bill of Mortality was a document. If you get a chance to look that up, that's why I'm telling you to look that up to kind of see what that entailed. The Black Death and the Plague of 1665. Now, looking at Europe and looking at civilization as a whole, exactly what is civilization? We know that we talked about societies. We talked about societies being an aggregate group of people living together with an established set of norms. We talked about culture being the norms, the ways, the actions, the traditions of the society. But what is civilization? According to the text and Webster's Dictionary, society is defined as a complex, civilization, is defined as a complex society of legal, cultural, and organizations. Society has 5 components: a system of writing, a system of governments, a division of labor, a production of food, and lastly, a religious system. So I wanted to add that to what we've been talking about. So with that being said, we will delve deeper into the Protestant Reformation, what that looked like, the major players, Martin Luther, and we're going to peel back the layers and discuss the Catholic Church and how the Catholic Church under Pope Leo, the Papal Bull, the Doomed Diverses, orchestrated and made it very easy for Europeans coming out of the Dark Ages, going into the age of exploration and discovery, to go out and obtain goods and services that were not readily accessible in Europe. So the Catholic Church co-signed and ordained this to be done, the enslavement of millions of native Africans from their homeland. So we will talk more about that. We will talk more about the role of the Catholic Church. Again, I will be also continue to grading of the articles going up yonder. Hopefully you read that. And we will again talk about the role of the Catholic Church in slavery. And we will continue chapter 15, and the questions will be due Friday. So this was just a little brief video that I wanted to point those things out. Have a great day. Peace and understanding.